All right, so today I'm joined by none other than Alan Misale. I'm hoping I'm actually pronouncing Misale correctly here. He's a managing partner at Viking Mergers and Acquisitions, based out of Florida, and has a good amount of years of experience in the industry, and working at Vikings Mergers and Acquisitions, that have, I think, more than 30 years of existence. So I am super intrigued to actually dive into all of that experience, and learnings. Alan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Alan, I'd love to start with digging into like your role. Um, what does your like day to day look like currently?
Day to day, and I mean, obviously, we're in the business of helping business owners transition out of the business. And so, whether it's, really spending time to educate an owner on what that process is like, um, trying to set realistic expectations, help them identify what are the strengths and weaknesses of their business, how are they going to be viewed by buyers, and and then kind of what their timeline is, so that it's very different if we can work with a business owner 2 or 3 years before they sell, versus 6 months and they want to sell. So you really do just have to pay attention to your audience and understand what it is they're looking to accomplish. Um, have discussions about various ways that might happen. Um, Talk about how they could spend whatever time they have between now and when they want to exit in terms of building value in the business, so that when they do go to market, several things are true. One, you try to go to market at the highest possible value. Um, the I want them to understand on a personal side, are they ready? Are they ready financially? Are they ready emotionally to make that transition? Have they thought about what life is like after ownership? Because 5 days on the golf course gets old after 6 months. So what are you going to do with yourself? And a surprising statistic, something like 70% of all business owners who sell regret it after 1 year. And I think the primary cause of that is that they really didn't think about life after the sale. And what are they going to do? What are they going to get involved in? They may end up buying another business. They may end up where, they want to spend more time volunteering their time, whatever it is. But it's to give it some thought. The old analogy, if you don't know where you're going, any old road will get you there. But if you take the time to plan it out, the likelihood is you're going to have a much better life. Is strange in that so many things happen to us are never the way we planned it. But the planning itself somehow gets us there. And so that's my typical day. And whether we're in the midst of finding a qualified buyer for business for sale, or we're in the midst of talking with an owner who's starting to think about exit and planning for that, that could change daily, but that's what we do.
Interesting. That's so true. I was just gonna say, like, you can plan, and like almost never it doesn't like go exactly to plan, but it's actually the planning itself that brings so much value, because that's where you reflect, and that's where you think things through. So even if it doesn't go exactly to plan, typically it ends up going, better than sort of not making any thoughts, or precautions, or any, yeah. It's like
Yeah,
running a business with no strategy.
I know on a personal level, I've always kept a 5-year plan ever since I was in my 20s. And rarely did the result ever come the way I planned it to, but I always got the result. And so I think it's that focus, not looking to be talent, seek and you shall find. And and to me, that just means if you can identify where it is you're trying to go, there is a path there. And so planning is what, helps pull the curtain back and give us direction.
Interesting.
So, that's, to me,
What's
that's,
the tactics that you use then to help business owners both plan, life after, or think about life after, or also, regards to actually, getting the best possible deal and best possible exit of their company, and actually building up the value in the time span that they have until they want to sell.
is there a question there?
Yeah, what's the strategies? How do you help founders or business owners
You know,
in that sense?
I think it starts by really just taking a look internally at the business, and there, as we spoke earlier, there's lots of focus on EBITDA or seller's discretionary earnings, however it's referred to, but it's just one component of value. Then there becomes the human component. What is my talent under roof? What is the culture inside my company? Because if a buyer doesn't fit culturally, it's probably not going to have the best outcome. What's my customer capital? In other words, do I have customer concentration issues? Do I have one or two or three customers giving me 80% of my business? From a buy side, that's a risk. And if the risk goes up, the price goes down. So if we can find ways to mitigate that risk and reduce that exposure, then the price goes up because the risk comes down. Then there becomes the financial side. And the financial side meaning, in an awful lot of small businesses, they will do what's called the compiled financial statement, which just basically means they turn their bank statement over to their accountant and tell them whatever are personal or business expenses. The accountant puts it in the proper buckets and you get a financial statement. But it is not always a real reflection of the business. And so, the importance of keeping clean books, keeping your financials up to date. Those kinds of things are critical when you're deciding to exit the business, and they're critical in making sure you'll get top dollar for the business when you exit. Then there becomes social capital. What is your reputation in the marketplace? How do customers reach you? How are you reaching out to customers? What differentiates you from 10 other businesses you compete with, whatever that number is? And then it becomes, what's the owner's role? And, is the owner working in the business or are they working on the business? If they're working in the business, then the business is truly dependent on that owner, that becomes a much larger risk to a buyer, because the buyer could be well qualified, could be great people, but they're not them. And so you can't replace them per se, so then the fear becomes customer evaporation. And are these people calling the owner's cell phone number when they want something rather than calling someone in the office? Because I would define businesses in two ways. You're either developing a lifestyle business or you're developing a value-driven business. And a lifestyle business says, look, I've made a great living. I don't have any debt. I'm making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, whatever the case might be. But it's you. It's you and a helper in a truck. And I can't transfer that, because no matter who the buyer is, they're not going to be you. On the other hand, for owners who really focus on value, and that's really paying attention to human, customer, financial, social, their role, or I would say, what have we done to de-ownertize the business? And my acid test is look, if you can get on a plane and leave for the next 10 weeks and the business runs, you're in great shape. But if you can't do that, or when you take a vacation, you got to be on your computer and on your cell phone because the office is calling, then the business is too dependent on you. So what can we do to get talent on the roof to start to relieve that? That's the business side. On the personal side, then, have you done any tax planning? Have you talked to a tax planning attorney or an estate attorney or an an accountant to really help you understand what the tax implications are, because for a lot of sellers, this is the biggest liquidity event their lifetime. And it's going to have to support their lifestyle. So then part of the question is, do you have a financial planner? Because is there a wealth gap? Is there an income gap? And what I mean by that is, you're running this business, take a conversation, the business makes $1 million a year, you're living a very nice lifestyle, your cost of living, say, is $400,000 a year. Well, what do we need in capital in order to generate $400,000 a year? Oftentimes people will get a valuation on their business and they'll say, well, that's not enough. That's okay. Then what do we do to drive up the value of the business, or what do you do to drive down your cost of living? Because that's going to be your income gap.
Where do you think is like the place that most owners get wrong, or the thing that most owners get wrong in this like process of potentially selling their business?
What does they get wrong? Two things. The simple one is oftentimes owner has an unrealistic value of the business. And keep in mind, I'm not setting the market price. The market sets the market price. The other is they didn't adequately prepare. So they didn't bring together the resources they need. So you need a financial planner. You need a tax advice, whether it be from CPA or legal, depending on the size of the state, whatever it is. You need to have a will and trust in order. You need to have a clear exit plan. All of those things are necessary components in order to minimize the owner's risk and to set realistic expectations in terms of, is it the right time? It could be, I want to exit now, and it happens often because I'm simply burned out. The business is killing me, literally. And then it's because, okay, what steps can be taken to relieve some of those things that are making your life difficult? And so maybe it does mean we're going to have to hire someone and bring them in internally. And yes, that will have an impact on income for a while, but if it's the right hire for the right reasons, those expenses should provide an opportunity to increase revenues without increasing stress. That's where these timelines matter. If you're telling me, look, I'm not looking to exit for the next 5 years, great. That gives us runway to accomplish what it is we want to accomplish. And so sometimes it's just getting, as we all have to do from time to time, you just have to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself. What do you want? What are you willing to do for it, to get it? And what is it going to take? And if you don't know the answer, seek out someone who can help you develop the answer. You don't want anybody who's going to give you the answer, because whatever answer I might give you is my answer, not yours.
Yeah.
And really our role is to help you to define what are your objectives, and then how could we get there. And so we're there to support what you want, your agenda, not ours.
So if you're a business owner out there that maybe feels like, they're not sure about, their valuation, or whether they might have a completely ridiculous number in their head that doesn't actually reflect the market value, or they feel like, they might actually be in a place where, they should consider, starting to plan on some of these things. Like, how do they get started?
In our case, simply give us a call, go to our website. You can see the kinds of businesses we represent. You can see some of the tools that we can use. And we do this with business owners, and we don't charge them for it. We're not fee-based. We kind of feel like that's the interview process for us. It's an opportunity to let that owner get to know who we are and whether the owner thinks we're a good fit. And it gives us that same opportunity, because we're not the right fit for everybody. And so making that kind of choice, or having that opportunity to spend some time and really uncover some of the things we're trying to do, And then either the relationship develops and it's believed by both parties that, we can work together well, we can communicate well, we speak the same language, we kind of see things in a similar way, um, then it's a good fit. And if it's not, it's not. I mean, I get that, you know.
It's actually a relatively easy like step to take as well. You don't have to do a lot of digging or investing on your own. You can actually get help relatively easily, and actually at least start to think about these things, and at least know like what are your options, what are the things that you might actually need to start planning for or start working on in your business or in your personal life, in what you're aiming for, and that actually makes sense. Um,
I mean, over my career, I've had about 9 different businesses. And I learned every one of my lessons the hard way. I learned it by screwing it up. And then you have to figure it out. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, one way or another, you get taught the lesson.
yeah.
My hope is we can avoid some of the pain in going through it by working with an owner at an early stage, um, and gain some experience from what we have been through. We know what it is to sit on their side of the desk. We know what it is to deal with contracts and bankers and employees, customers. We've been there, done that. And in my case in particular, I guarantee I did it wrong before I learned how to do it right. But it was trial and error. I wish 30 years ago I would have had somebody, that I had run into and would take the time to educate me. I've had some good mentors along the way, please don't get me wrong. I've learned what I learned from people, but the most important things I learned in life generally came from a mistake made or a failure rather than a success. If we can help business owners kind of minimize that or avoid it, then, for me, that gets me up in the morning. That I love doing that stuff.
What's your approach? Like, what's your approach to actually then getting out to as many of these founders, and actually, getting them in your network, or them actually knowing that you're out there? Yeah.
We, like most other companies, I mean, we do social media, we advertise, we do those things. Little different in the world we're in because mergers and acquisitions is always covered by confidentiality agreements. So, I'm a profession that rarely gets introduced as, hey, this is my M&A guy or my business broker or whatever. I'm the banker or the insurance guy or something else because protecting that confidentiality is the most important thing we do. You can severely damage a business by information going public that a business is for sale. Employees get worried, and human nature is, in the absence of information, we assume the worst. And so, protecting that, making sure that the appropriate parties know what they need to know at the appropriate time is a critical step. Other than that, then it becomes referral. I spend a lot of my time either doing seminars for groups of people. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we did one for the Association for Plumbing Contractors, and just educating on things we're talking about, and the recognition. Just be aware, and whether you want to do something now or is it 5 years from now, um, it really doesn't matter. That really is your call. We just want to drive home the point that it's the right time to begin to think about what's my end game, and what will it take me to get there, and when I get there, what do I want to do? If you do that in advance, you're going to end up in a much better place. May not be everything you said you wanted, may not be 100%, may not be in the way you thought you would get there, but you will get there. At least at that time now you have an opportunity to make an informed decision as to what your next steps are. And that's the key to me, is we all have to make a decision. We're better off if we're informed about the decision we're making, because every action has a reaction. So, everything we do will create a result. The question becomes, is it the desired result? And so, it's like company culture, as I started with. Every company has one. The question is, do you run it or does it run you? And then if it does run you, what do you do to start to correct that behavior? And those are all things that are fixable. They're all, none of it is insurmountable. It's all fixable stuff. And, and it's fixable stuff. Once you've been through it, it always sounds easy. But going through it, it just, or recognizing what's even driving it, just takes some forethought.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Like the example that you mentioned earlier with as a business owner, it's easy to get into the no one can do what I do mindset. Maybe you've made a hire and it's not really gone right, or that you ended up with this, but it's like there's so many examples of businesses that have done that. To me, it was a question of systemizing, so thinking in systems, because systems is transferable, but your internal knowledge and just everything that you try to keep track of, that's hard to actually transfer to a different person.
That's a great point you bring up, because when we ask about policy and procedure, are they committed to writing? And if they are in writing, do you actually follow it? Lots of times people will write it document and it'll go in the drawer, but nobody actually follows it.
Yeah.
So, but if it is, you're right, then it becomes transferable, it's teachable, it's scalable. All those things, that's a great value driver. And and depending again on size of company, when we're talking about most small businesses are valued under $5 million. And that's where, in a lot of cases, they could use the most help. Because, take some of the contractors, like the plumbing contractors I said we did a program for. Well, oftentimes these companies are started by a plumber. And they're very good plumbers. And along the way, they did good work, they're getting referrals, they start to get business, they hire their first helper, they hire their next plumber, those kinds of things. And at about $1 million in revenue, the business is now running them. And they've got to step out of the truck and start to learn to manage a business and people. That's a very difficult transition a lot of times. So getting some help to do that, and then start to recognize, okay, what is my next step? Because your next ceiling is going to be at about $5 million. Because now you have to start the layer management. And so now, how do I do that? Am I going to grow from within? And am I bringing people in with the idea that they may start as a helper in a truck, but ultimately I want to bring them in to where they're in a supervisor or management role? That's how you scale. If you don't do that, you become that lifestyle business.
Exactly.
And you can't scale it because there's only 24 hours in a day. You're only one person. And so there's only so much you can do, no matter how good you are, or how hard you're willing to work, or how hard you try. Unless you can duplicate yourself along the way, you can reach a point, but that's it. You're done. That's your ceiling. Yeah. And so a lot of times when to that point, it becomes a difficult transition.
You think that's so true. Do you think what business owners find difficult as well? Because it's almost, if you start this business, you have this idea, or there's something you really like doing, or you actually like running the business, and then you also want to scale the business or potentially sell it at one point, but that's suddenly new skills. It's not going to be the same set of tasks that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. Now it's suddenly actually managing people, and it's planning projects, and it's all of these different things that's not actually doing the job. As I see it as well, there's sort of there's these businesses where that's probably the lifestyle businesses. That's the ones where, it's a person that is creative and really likes doing the work, and that's fine as well. You can scale a business somewhat in that sense as well by earning or increasing your pricing and that sort of sense, but you're limited to how many hours you have in a day. And if you want to step out of that, then you have to almost become a different, then it's different tasks that you have to actually do. And I guess that's just part of what you have to
It's
realize.
part of growing the business.
Yeah.
And these new tasks now are foreign. They didn't come in knowing anything about accounting
Yeah.
or inventory management or HR. You know, that's not their skill set. And so, but reaching out to get that help, oftentimes they just don't know where to reach out to. Uh, they may talk to the family attorney or accountant, whatever the case might be, but you know, like everything today, they're specialized. And so, for example, having a law degree doesn't mean I know mergers and acquisitions. All those things have become specialties, and just that's true in medical. It's true in all the professions. Is that there you could have your CPA designation, but a CPA does not necessarily mean that your specialty is tax planning. And so, finding the right talent for the need that exists is part of the process that we try and help them with, in making sure that they're working with the right professionals, because as the business grows, you will oftentimes outgrow your professionals. And so now another need comes into place. Nobody likes to end relationships and those kinds of things. Guys, I've been working with the guy for the last 8 years, and he's done a nice job, and blah, 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 blah. And all that's true, and you're not looking to replace them. You're looking to get the supplemental experience needed in order to enhance what's being done. And so finding them those things, when we talk about, on the legal side, your estate planning attorney is not your M&A attorney. And so understanding that those disciplines are different, even though they're both lawyers. Same is true in M&A. You have what we call Main Street. Main Street tends to be those businesses under $5 million. And oftentimes that marketplace is most handled by business brokers. As you move to and we do business brokering. As you move to the M&A side, which in terms of volume tends to be businesses above $5 million, then it becomes much more an advisory role, or at least should become much more of an advisory role, and putting the parts in place that will help that owner maximize their stockholder equity. So when they do exit, they get top dollar for it. And there's only two ways we make money in business, and it's either our current income from sales, or it's our stockholder equity for the value we build in the business and the ability to transfer it to a new owner.
That's interesting. What do you think is like the single most valuable piece, like if someone as a business owner, listened to this recording today and was somewhat interested, or like what's the single most important action that they should take today, that they could take themselves?
Be willing to listen.
What do you mean by that?
Have a conversation. Be willing to listen. If it makes sense to you, because this should all be your agenda, not ours. It should be through your eyeglasses, not mine. Our role is to really help you define that, clarify it, develop it into action steps, and then help you find the people you need for these different components to get a team around you. It takes a community. That used to be the saying, right? It takes a community to raise a child. It takes a community. No business succeeds by itself. So getting the right people around you, and picking those people based on, again, do we communicate well? Has trust developed? Nobody does business with people they don't trust, they don't like. taking the time to talk to people, deciding what's important to me, developing that strategy. The biggest thing is their family doesn't know what's going on, especially spouses. Spouse has no idea how to run the business, even in a lot of cases where the spouse is on the payroll or does books or does those kinds of things. But really, they don't know the customers, they don't know what goes on in terms of how do we get from A to Z, and then something happens, be it health, whatever, and they are in a really tough spot. Imagine that for a spouse, because the business generally is the major part of the income, and then what happens if that starts to go away or decline significantly? Most of those things are avoidable, and there could be a circumstance outside your control. The housing crash we had in 2007 through 2010. That was driven by bad bank policies and poor loan quality and all of those things that created it. That's something completely outside of your control that can influence your business. But the majority of the things that happen within our business or within our family, we can control. But all of it requires communication. And so even if it's a situation where, hey, we started this company, we're 2 partners or 3 partners or 4 partners, and you know what, we just don't see the world the same anymore. How do we unravel this thing and still be fair to everyone? Sometimes it's divorce. And again, I've seen divorces that just destroy nice companies versus others where I've worked with them, and as long as the parties will talk to me, they don't even have to be in the same room. There's a solution if you want it. If your intent is to destroy it, you can do that by yourself. But so it's just whatever the circumstance, just be willing to listen, have a conversation, and be honest with yourself about what's realistic. It's fun to talk about, hey, we could grow this business tenfold, but are you really prepared to do the work to do it? And is that what you want? Is more work-life balance more important? How is your health? And realistic as we get older, certainly you're still a young man, Frederick, but as you get older, listen, I'm a healthy guy, but I'm very realistic at my age. That could change in a day. And so just being aware of the fact that, listen, I'm going to do the best I can for as long as I can, but none of us outrun time. And so, it's just prepare yourself, because it's going to happen. It'll happen voluntarily or it'll happen involuntarily, but it will happen. And the better prepared you are, the softer the landing that will be.
Wanted to reach out. What's the best way and have a chat? What's the best way to for them to do that?
Well, they can, if they want to talk to me, they can email me at Alan, ALAN, at vikingmerger.com. They can go to our website, vikingmerger.com. We now have, I think, 18 offices in 9 states. We have 2 here in Florida. We have an office in Tampa and an office in Fort Lauderdale. But just, drop a note, visit the website, and I guarantee you it won't cost you anything except a few minutes of time. And if the conversation makes sense, great, we'll take a next step. And if it doesn't make sense or it's not the time, that's okay too. We'll be fine. We probably, round numbers, probably value at least 600 businesses a year. Probably talk to literally thousands. But, we only represent about 10% of those, because we want them to be ready too. And we want to make sure that none of us are wasting our time. We don't want the owner to get bogged down in it. They got companies to run. If we know we're going to have a problem somewhere, then we want to first address the problem and correct it before we go to market. So oftentimes we'll work with a company. Last year we sold a company we worked with for 8 years before we actually sold it. But it's okay. Each time you kind of look at it and you go, okay, do we want to continue to focus on growing, or is it time to exit? And as long as you're doing that eyes wide open, likelihood is you're not going to be disappointed. If it's done by surprise, it'll probably be something that didn't get the result you were looking for, or that you wish you would have done differently after the fact.
Alan, it's been a true pleasure. Thank you for coming on and sharing all of your experience. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. You have a great day.
So.